Thank you.
Good afternoon, John.
Hi.
How are you?
I have my shoes on, so
Yeah.
as soon as I see that, I get itchy.
So you sat here for the last hour and watched it,
No, I
right?
wanted, of course, the projection is way too light. Steve Zaillian would have pulled his hair out. It's the whole thing is very dark, but because the throw is far from there, I don't think it's a DCP. So
Right.
it's much more milky. So I was glad Steve wasn't here because he'd be like, "Oh my God," because it's much darker. When you watch it on television.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually, I mean, especially the ending
Yeah.
when you go descend.
Yeah, everything is much darker because it's the throw. It's
Yeah.
the throw when you don't have the DCP.
But I mean, it's probably been a year and a half or 2 years since you shot that.
Well, it was on last year. Then, I guess, so a year and a half or something.
What was the experience just now of watching this?
It was interesting seeing it on the big screen.
Yeah,
I hadn't
yeah,
seen it.
right.
When I watched it with everyone else, I watched it one thing at a time. I mean, I'd seen the first two with a Tribeca last year, and
Yeah.
but then I watched it in order like everyone else did.
Yeah.
I wanted to see it like everyone else did, and so it was interesting to see it again.
Well,
I was
I mean-
watching it. I was sort of like a regular viewer in some ways.
Yeah. But I mean, there's just not a false episode in this whole run, I don't think. But this one I love because it combines the two tones, which is sort of the great tragedy of the prison system,
Right.
and also the this amazing humor by Richard Price and Steve
Right.
Zaillian, which I think comes out a lot in this episode. But there's a scene with
Right.
Jeannie Berlin and Frank Wood standing over the body.
Yeah,
and the,
yeah. There's a lot of black humor in there.
But one of the funniest things in this is that the title comes from Fisher Stevens says that there's, I guess, a shortage of Viagra in the city. You have to go to the black market to find some. And who?
So what is the title of this episode?
Season of the Witch.
Season of the Witch, right? That's right. Okay.
And who is the black market Viagra dealer that you?
That's Richard Price.
Yeah.
That's Richard Price. Yeah. That's Richard. Yeah.
Whose idea was that?
Steve, I think. Yeah,
Really?
Yeah. Richard was very nervous. He was sort of, I want to get out of here. He was always like, I don't want to be here. I know Richard a long time, since the 80s.
You were in Clockers.
I was in
before
Color of
then,
Money.
Color of Money.
Yeah, and I've been in a couple other projects that maybe, we came close to doing together, Mad Dog and Glory. And I've been a big reader of his novels over the years.
Yeah,
I've read so many of them, including the last one, The Whites, which is a terrific book.
Yeah. Well, I think you also said, too, that like Clockers could have been 8 hours.
Oh, yeah. Clockers, it certainly could have been 6 hours.
Yeah.
Probably 8, because it was such a rich, tapestry of a whole world.
Right.
But they weren't really doing that at that time. So, that would have been fun to explore thoroughly.
So what was this? I mean, you have this scene with you and Riz in the holding area. I guess
in the
area.
baby room. Yeah, it
Yeah.
looks like a kid's room. It's all plastic chairs. Everything's
And-
plastic.
I mean, it is incredibly powerful what you do there because he thinks that you're not noticing
Right.
as he's putting pellets in his mouth that,
Right.
that contain heroin. And in that line, when you lean in and you say, "I know you got to do it, but if you get caught, it's all over." I mean, that's where this show really lives, right? It's in these moments.
It's all in the minutia, and sort of the whole experience of going through the criminal justice system. And if you don't have money, if you don't have a good lawyer,
Yeah.
even when your trial comes up, if the state says or the city says, the people are not ready, that doesn't count as time served, even if you've been in there for 3 months, 4 months. It could even be for a misdemeanor. You can wind up being in there in Rikers for a couple of years.
Can you talk about Khalif Browder?
Well, that was an article that was written in the New Yorker, and I had done a lot of research before, and we were just, it was a couple months in when it came out. And I think, really put his finger on the whole system. There was a kid who was accused of stealing a backpack, and he refused to cop a plea. He wound up in Rikers, and he obviously, people tried to, push him around, and he fought back. They put him in isolation. He was in solitary confinement, I think, for a total of over 800 days.
Yeah.
And every time they asked him, would he cop a plea, he'd said no, he wanted a hearing. and all the time that he served did not count because the people would say the people are not ready, and so that would not
I
count.
think he was 16 when
He was 16, so he lost his sophomore and junior year, and he had tried to kill himself a couple times. And by the time he came out, he was kind of really he lost his sense of how to be happy and connect with other people. And I was really taken by it, and so was Riz. And I reached out to them, and I was actually supposed to meet him. We were going to have lunch together. I was thinking, well, maybe he could use a little job or something, and work with us, and could certainly help me, And he was about to meet me, and then he wasn't up for it, and then he killed himself.
Yeah.
And
He was 22 years old. He killed himself.
I was he that old? I don't know if he was that old.
But
Or
he had spent, his
he was a
entire
couple of
teenage-
years. Three. I don't know if he was even 20.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know if he was. And so it really put its finger on what the system. And this is a kid who was obviously was innocent because he didn't cop a plea,
Yeah.
and what went on to him. So there are guilty people in there too. So it's a very complicated system, and I think Richard and Steve, took it on and tried to do something that wasn't exploitive and that was at least intelligent. And you see, everyone is compromised in the system.
Yeah.
There's no one who is basically wears the white hat and the black hat.
Yeah.
And I like that about it. I like that it's about the little details. But we're all formed by our experiences, and when you go in those places, I've met prisoners who killed someone when they were young, it was like self-defense or whatever, and now they're 37, 40 years old, and they've gone to school, they've educated themselves, and they may never get another chance at having a life.
Yeah.
And so the system is skewed. They don't really think about rehabilitation. There are some good places, like Sing Sing, for example, that has a college there. The people... they actually have a theater program in place like that, but that's for people who are better prisoners.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they go way upstate.
I mean, but Rikers,
But Rikers is a jail.
Yeah.
So it's different. It's but you can be. It's we were there, and then they shut it down. We couldn't go there anymore to visit. Because I wanted to go back, and they were like, no.
What was it like though? Just
Scary.
Yeah.
It's scary. Being in the tombs is scary. I've worked in other prisons. I worked years ago in St. Louis Obispo, and that was of maximum security, prison. I worked actually in a movie in the 80s, To Live and Die in L.A., where I worked with prisoners, and there had guys on towers with machine guns and everything.
Yeah.
And, that was interesting trying to act. I think we talk about having critics because all the prisoners would be commenting on your performance as you were doing it. They were like, wow, this guy's... He's not shit, You hear all these comments in the background. You're like, wow, guys blowing you kisses. And, that was an interesting experience. But I remember being locked in there, and I remember my legs were like, I was like, wow, man. All of a sudden, like everything tenses up.
Yeah, yeah.
And you see when we work in these places, a lot of times people aren't allowed to look at us. Like in the tombs, they put them up against the wall. They make them turn.
Really?
Yeah, to make all the prisoners turn away from you. And so it's I've had interactions and not. So it's,
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't want to have to go to prison. At the same time, I find it not the jail but the whole prison system. There are some people who are really trying to do
Yeah.
the right thing, but it's like a business in this country.
Well, yeah. Have you seen Ava DuVernay's documentary,
yeah. I mean,
13th?
yeah,
It's quite eye-opening.
That's right. I mean, it's really incarceration is big business.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is at least we're doing fiction, but at least it's related to the world around us.
Yeah,
I thought
sure.
that was really intelligently realized by Steve and by Richard.
Well, let me ask you about John Stone, because this is your congratulations, by the way, on your Screen Actor Guild nomination.
Thanks.
It's very good.
Thanks. I'm happy to. I'm happy to share that with all my with Riz, who was also nominated, and all the people who weren't nominated, like Jeannie Berlin, who's genius, and Bill Camp, and the rest of the cast.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a great cast.
It's the ensemble
Great
is.
cast.
this is your fourth nomination, actually, and the other three were Herbie Stemple and Quiz Show, and then you did Howard Cosell in Monday Night Mayhem, and Billy Martin.
Right. Those are all based on real people.
I was going to ask you about that, because this is the one where you had to...
this is based on a real guy, too.
Well, what was the... I mean, I know that there's a lawyer named Kenny Montgomery.
Kenny Montgomery is actually like the opposite of my character. I mean, he looks like a Dearest Elba. You know? He's a star guy, but Richie Roberts was also very helpful, and Richard and everyone, and there were other lawyers I met. But Kenny really articulated the whole experience for me, and he took me and he showed me tapes, and you know, he showed me. I met him in a jail, and while he was interviewing someone, and he was just so articulate.
Yeah.
Now he is a guy who would cost him a lot to defend someone, but he's able to do it.
Yeah.
And so he explained to me what that is to hold someone's life in your hand, and he just was, you know, so many of his observations about how in a trial, how you control time and space, how you make a logic to something that was illogical, and he was able to articulate his experience of what he goes through in order to do a good job. And I realized that was something that someone like John Stone probably had all the capacity to do, but didn't have the stomach for it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so he didn't want to do that anymore, because sometimes you lose a big case and then you're never the same.
Yeah.
How
it's all consuming, right?
It's all consuming. Many of these people, they go from, you know, wife to wife, you know, they're married to their legal pad, you know, and it can really be same thing with a detective, you know, it becomes like you're haunted by it, you know. And
we see the physical toll that it takes on John. I mean,
yeah. Well, I mean, that's why I think maybe he has this condition. I mean,
of course,
it could be a manifestation of that, but he has all the capacity to be a really terrific lawyer, and I like that, because I know a lot of people in life, in our business, and in other businesses, who really have the ability to do, you know, terrific work in whatever their chosen field is, and sometimes they don't have the constitution to do that, because you don't want to go through rejection, failure, or whatever. And I think it's a big thing. It's a big part of life, and I don't think people really think about that. Yeah. You know.
So in addition to talking to some of these defense attorneys in Brooklyn and New York, I mean, there's this. I feel like there's lots of '70s era sort of like Walter Matthau, or like Peter Falk in Columbo. I think it appears here a bit in your character. What was the process like? Kind of. Well, I was drawing from old heroes.
They liked '70s films, Steve and Richard. Yeah. And so I know all those Sidney Lumet films. I mean, I watched, and The Verdict. I rewatched a bunch of them. But I definitely thought of those. He seems like a throwback guy, and so I did a big like vocal warm up every day to kind of make my voice a little deeper and bigger. But you know, there is, when you watch the original Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. I mean, I was in the remake.
You were in the remake, yeah.
You just can't. You can't compete with those guys, you know what I mean? Because they didn't have cell phones, you know, and they're all eating sandwiches and like, you know.
The walkie-talkies.
Yeah, and there was a different sound then. There was a different, like, was an older New York sound, and certainly very different from Bronx to Brooklyn, Queens. And so I thought, you know, I'm going to definitely tap into that a little bit, that the guy's kind of a throwback, you know, and plus, you know, he doesn't have shoes, so it's like a biblical throwback, you know. But I thought I had so much dialogue that when you watch a lot of old films, you know, people just spit it out because they're all from the theater or whatever. And I thought the key to Richard's dialogue is to have tremendous variety, but also be able to have a certain rhythm and be able to shift and everything. And then, plus, he's a lawyer, and lawyers talk for a living.
Yeah. And
or speak.
And is very charismatic in his own way, you know. Also, sort of sensitive. Like this episode, I think, also features a scene of you going to buy cat toys.
Right. Well, he's like a person. I thought, once again, I credit the writers, because, you know, everyone is the lead in their own life, you know, and everyone is lonely, and he obviously is lonely. You know, he has a kid who stays with him occasionally. He's divorced. So they had all these problems for the character, which made it wonderful, to attack, because there's all these obstacles, and that's what you want. You want to have that. And even though I had to be in the chair forever, with the makeup, and it became like part of it.
Do you personally like cats?
I'm allergic a little bit.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah. And I was allergic to Bam Bam a little bit too. I mean, I could, when Bam Bam was on my chest, I was like, I start sneezing, and I can't take it for a long time. But so it wasn't a far stretch for me. I mean, I get like hay fever, I mean, I just start sneezing. I can't stop sneezing. So I was hoping that wouldn't happen during, but I did think, going to like the animal shelter was like, that's another prison,
Yeah.
It's like,
well, I mean, the cat is
so terrible when you go to those places. I was just holding my head, and Steve would be like trying to, because he's so into minutia sometimes, directing the cat, which is impossible. You need food. It's like actors, like if we give us food, we'll do it. You know what I mean? And I was like thinking, like, Steve, he's not going to turn his head. He goes, can he do this? And can he do that? And I was like, he's a cat, man. We follow him.
Yeah.
Oh my God, when he would stick his head out of the box. And, I was with him a lot, and I also directed later on some of the second units with me and Bam Bam.
You're kidding.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
like,
I did like a lot of shots, like on the subway, and all the shots like with the door and all that stuff. But it's. You have to have food there, you have to have something. And then he would play with you sometimes. But I thought it was a great touch, but very interesting, while when the series was on, everyone was texting me, what's going on with the cat?
Right.
No one was asking me, like, who killed the girl? It was like, is the cat okay? And I was like, there you go again.
Well, and I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't enjoyed this series yet,
well,
but But the cat becomes a great metaphor for second chances,
that's right.
and for sort of, getting set free. What has been because in your career there are just so many Venn diagrams in terms of your audience. You're in Spike Lee's films, you're in the Coen Brothers, you're in Adam Sandler's movies sometimes. The Transformers.
Try to make a living.
Well, no, but it's great because I feel like you have such a wide range of people who admire you from all over the spectrum. What's been this experience like since it's aired in terms of being recognized for John Stone?
Well, it's interesting. I think when you're on a television show, you're in their living room.
Yeah.
So people talk to you, they want to know about the show, during the show, how my feet is, the cat. They talk to you as they're part of the show. But I mean, I really loved working on something. Many times I've made movies adapted from novels, and you feel they've been so truncated. And this was, when I read it, I felt like it was a novel. I felt like this is the novel, but it's the long form, and so it was a really wonderful experience because it got richer as it went along. It didn't get, it wasn't like I wanted to finish it, at all. So it's been a really good experience, and you always try to vary things when you have the opportunity, and obviously this opportunity came to me. It was very bittersweet because it was my friend who was going to do it. And,
James Gandolfini.
He was someone I knew, and we were friends. I directed him in
Yeah.
my film Romance and Cigarettes, and I knew him for over 20 years. And so at first I was like, but then I realized he only had worked one day, and then I read everything, and I said, okay, now I have to make it. Just got to make it my own. He was still in the process of figuring it out, but. As everyone knows, you need an opportunity to do something, and so it's I welcome that whenever I get that chance.
Well, I think it's kind of a sweet story that James hated makeup.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, we used to laugh every day in the chair.
So you had a chance to
I could
remind
see him
yourself.
laughing at me all the time, thinking like, "Aha, you got to do it, not me." I know he didn't like that, but it was long. It was long, yeah. And Stephen Kelly, the makeup guy, he had worked on The Sopranos, actually, and he did an amazing job. And we really worked well together,
It was more than just your feet. I mean.
Oh, no, sometimes it was my face, my back, and sometimes he has his shirt off. And, you know, it was just we had to figure out how to help each other and how to take it off together. And you know, I was the first guy in and the last guy out always.
Well, let me also ask you about. You just mentioned the animal shelter. I mean, that wasn't a set. This show was shot.
Yeah, that was real.
That was real.
And Rikers is a set.
Right, right. And I think the police station might have been.
That's some real and a big set.
But this was not a movie shot on back lots, soundstage.
No.
This was
Couple
New York.
Couple sets.
How did that sort of influence your performance, being so gritty and so real and so?
Well, I was on the street. My feet, I was freezing.
It was the winter.
Bare feet, you know, and people full of eczema and people looking at me and looking away. So it was good, except for the cold. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good sometimes that you get some real life around you. If you're on a stage for too long, sometimes it can get a little, you know, antiseptic or something.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice to have both, actually.
Yeah, and I think Steve really took advantage of even the downtown courthouse.
Oh yeah. We shot in there, you know,
Yeah.
a lot, and you know, it's interesting, and you know, a lot of times people really don't want you to jump ahead.
Yeah.
They try to, you know.
Yeah.
But I you know, it's interesting when I was there for research, you saw a lot of people like John Stone just looking, you know, for clients.
Really?
Looking for a job, you know, just trawlers they call them, you know, and they're just like. I was like, not me, you know. I don't need you.
Well, you even had you had a ad on the subway, didn't you?
They put the ad on the subway, and then HBO is very small. But some people thought it was like my lookalike, and there was a guy, John Stone, and but it was an ad for the show. So that was their crazy idea. So
Let me ask some questions from people here in the audience. I have some cards. So Jeffrey Pennington wants to know, besides working all the time, how do you keep up with your training? Do you use coaches or teachers?
I have a voice teacher, Joan Lader, that I sometimes go see. She's a singing teacher, and matter of fact, I did her warm up every day for this.
The vocal.
Her vocal warm up every day for this. I do, you know, Pilates. I used to have an acting teacher, Robert Modica, who I would sometimes, you know, talk to about things, but he passed away now. But I usually go through, you know. I had a lot of good teachers, and some of them have passed away now. So I don't usually, you know, but I'll do lots of readings, and I still do theater, and I try to take care of myself, you know, physically, and I try to do a play every now and then to make sure I stay, you know, in shape.
Yeah.
To do that, but sometimes I'll just do a reading of like a really hard play to see if I can get my mouth around it or something.
What's the last reading that you did?
The last reading, I don't know if it was Cyrano de Bergerac or
All right.
I don't know which. I don't know if that was the last one. But that's what I try to do, and go to the theater and but I try to do my warm up that I would do normally when I perform.
Yeah. Well, it's great too because I mean you have such great sort of screen chemistry with Jeannie Berlin here.
Oh, she's great.
And you directed her mom, Elaine May, in a play.
I did. I directed these 3 one-acts called Relatively Speaking by Woody Allen, Ethan Cohen, and Elaine. And I don't know why Elaine actually approved me, but when I met her, she said, well, I think, you know, she has that lisp, you know, she goes, I think you're a terrific actor, you know, and she said, plus you look just like my first husband, Marvin. He was and that was Jeannie's father, and I saw a picture of him, and I actually do look like Marvin. So, and so it was great to work with Jeannie because I'm a huge fan of Elaine's, and I really do think Jeannie is, she's just. I mean, I credit Steve, you know, also for fighting to cast her.
For thinking about her,
but I just think it's like she's a real prosecutor.
Of course.
You know, I was terrified watching her. Like, I was watching the show. I was like, oh my God, you know, he doesn't have a chance, you know. But what's brilliant about her, I think, is that she doesn't fall into like one trap.
No.
There's no trap she falls into. And anyway, it was just, I wish I had more scenes with her, and I'd love to work with her again.
Well, she has an amazing arc, as do all the characters here, but I love when at the very end we see her with like an e-cigarette in her hand.
Oh, no.
That's for the first time we notice that detail about her.
Yeah, I know. She's just...
And that's Steve, and that's Richard as well.
That's right.
But
she rehearsed her whole role with Elaine, she told me.
Really?
Yeah. And she told me that Elaine, played all the parts. And I could just see her doing them all. I was like, did she play my part too? Because maybe I could steal something from her, Because I really think, Elaine is, yeah.
So here's a question from M. Quintana. Which of your roles has been the most challenging but rewarding?
Uh, which roles? I mean, this was a hard role. I did a production of Beckett's Endgame at BAM. That was pretty rewarding.
Mm.
And,
And challenging.
and challenging. I did this show. I remember doing it. I was supposed to be blind, and I finally got the courage to just close my eyes and do the show with my eyes closed. Because I have glasses on. Dark glasses, and that was terrifying doing that show. But I loved doing it. There's plenty of things that you're really afraid, to do, and that's when you're. I did a film based on a Primo Levi book many years ago called The Truce, and I spent many, many years working on that. And I don't really talk very much in the film, and I work with this guy Francesco Rosi, and that was a huge.
You lost a lot of weight for that.
Yeah. I was really thin for a long time. There was rumors that I was dying for a while. And it was very interesting to me. All my friends said I should have told them that I recovered because this miracle happened. Anyway, but it depends. But there's always challenges. Can be physically. When I did Herb's Temple, I gained a lot of weight. That wasn't very good for me. So that was, but it was fun to do.
Yeah. Well, and that film feels more relevant with every single passing year. I mean.
Oh well. Yeah. Well, now we're into performance art now. So, well, goes to show you the power of performance.
Quiz show, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but just the world we live in. Now.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, we're actors. We're supposed to perform. So. Reality television has replaced us now. So.
Oh, sure it has.
Yeah.
Replaced a lot of things. So this is from Sean and Andy. How would you compare the business of acting in LA versus New York, and how has it changed?
I never have lived in Los Angeles. I've only worked in Los Angeles. I always stayed here because my family was here, and I also thought there was more theater here, and there were I was surrounded by other professions, and I like that. Yeah. So I think in the film world, certainly serious movies, the medium-sized films have kind of disappeared. It's either really small films that are good, like Moonlight, for example, or really big film. Most cutting-edge work is done more on television now, right? Because of cable and everything like that. So I do think it has changed, movies I think have suffered from that because I think what people are talking about most of the time isn't what's in the movies. I think in the theater, lots of writers go back and forth between, and there's still a lot of terrific writers out there, and new writers coming out all the time. And it was interesting. I got to see Fences recently, but I knew August because I was at the O'Neill with him when he first started, August Wilson, and I remember sitting next to him when he was doing the first reading with Edith Oliver of the New Yorker. He was sharpening his pencils, and Bill Cobb was playing Troy. Mary Alice was his wife, and he kept, passing me pencils to sharpen and handing them to him, and it was just thrilling. I've seen the play and everything like that, and I was thinking about, what a big, effect he's had, on American theater, and creating a whole dramaturgy about a group of people that have never really been represented. And
I think that Denzel Washington wants to do the whole cycle.
Yeah, he's not going to be there. He's going to produce it.
Just,
so
that's pretty incredible. A lot of it, some of it for TV, maybe some of it else for films.
Right.
Now, I have to ask about the temptation to come back if Richard and Steve Zaillian ask you to, because there's.
I'm good with that.
We want to.
I'm good with it. If they come up with something that they really want to do, and it's really about something, and it's about an issue that's real, and I think they wouldn't do it otherwise. And they've asked me, would I be interested? I said, well, if you guys feel that there's something there, then they'll send me the first thing. And but I loved working on it, and there's a character that I really I really like.
There's a PS on this one from Sean and Andy, and it says, "Will you say something as Jesus?"
Oh, well,
And your hair is
say,
on.
I can honestly say you'll see more of Jesus.
I know.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
Yeah. I was able to. I don't know how. It's a long. It's a long. It's a long story. It's not a sequel at all, but it's a character that I kind of developed or was inspired by something I had done on stage at the Public Theater, and they had seen it.
This is Jesus from
The Big Lebowski.
Coen Brothers,
Yeah.
Big Lebowski.
Yeah, and they had seen me do something at the Public, and they liked and they said, well, we would like to write something like that. And so I've kind of taken that idea and, brought it full circle around. It's a remake, actually, or it's a reimagining of an old French film called Les Valseuses, which means the waltzers, and it also means the testicles. And it was it was a very transgressive film in the 70s that I saw when I was, I don't know, 19 or 20. And it made Gerard Depardieu and Patrick Dewey, both stars. And so the writer, director, Bertrand Blier, he liked a couple films I've directed and gave me the rights. And while I was working on it and doing readings of it, I thought, well, maybe I was calling the character JC because it's Jean-Claude.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized, I said, JC. Maybe I just call him Jesus. And then I just started playing around with that kind of a character. And I thought, well, this works. And Coen Brothers liked it because it was his own thing.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm finishing editing it now.
It's called Going Places?
Yeah, it's called Going Places. And it's Jesus, So, yeah. That was it was interesting because I based that character on someone's father who was a criminal. And I met him the day he got out of jail. And, the original character. And I remember asking him, Mr. So-and-so, I said, what are you going to do now? And he said, blah, blah, blah. He had a very high voice. He said, well, I got nothing else to do. So, I do a little this, a little that, and I was like, wow, this guy, I love the way this guy talks. And then I was doing a play, and I was thinking, well, how can I do that and project that high? And it was a battle, but I was able to do it on stage. And so sometimes these things stay within you. Mm-hmm. And so it's been a real treat to explore the character.
I mean, you have probably less than 10 minutes of screen time in The Big Lebowski.
I think like 7 minutes.
7 minutes.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I credit the Gypsy Kings.
But I saw pictures of you back in the cornrows. You got the hair all...
I have cornrows in this movie, yeah. My hair was really long. I looked like, when they took it out, I looked like Sly and the Family Stone. I mean, I used to have I did have a huge afro when I was a teenager.
Right.
So, but we decided, we tried all different hairdos, and we thought the hairnet would look good over the, very tight cornrows. So, yeah.
So you're editing that now? And
yeah, I'm almost done with it, and now we'll have to show it to various parties who are interested, and we'll see what happens. But I think it turned out very nicely. Bobby Cannavale is my co-star, and Audrey Tautou.
Oh yeah, Amélie.
Amélie, and Susan Sarandon, and Sonia Braga is in it, and John Hamm has a cameo, and J.B. Smoove has a nice part.
Oh.
Michael Badalucco. So we have a good cast.
Well, I mean, this is probably your 5th or 6th film as a director
6th,
now, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
plus one documentary, right.
But it's a whole other sort of area that we don't even talk about very much, how prolific you are as a film director.
I've made a couple movies, yeah. I mean, Mac was my first movie, but it came out of a play that we had done. And I like doing things that I, have like a passion for. And this I like because I like Blier's mind. I like how irreverent he is. And I thought it would be kind of good, especially right now. I think it's a movie about freedom, basically. I mean, obviously they're not the most intelligent people, but everyone likes to live that way, or at least in their fantasy. You know what I mean? So it was really fun to attack it.
And most of the movies you made as a director are comic, or I mean, Mac isn't really, but they have a lot of light elements in them. Fun and Gigolo, certainly.
Yeah, well, I think that my favorite thing is you can say comic tragedy, tragic comedy. I think when you have both in something, it's really great. And I think sometimes with drama without it is just unrelenting and it's not realistic. And I think the hardest thing is to just do a pure comedy
Right.
that has levels to it. You know, sometimes comedies work for 30 minutes and that's it. You know, it's very hard to do a 90-minute thing.
Well, and lastly, it brings us back to the night of, and you know, this episode ends, as we were saying, with you sort of underground in the dark.
Yes.
But the
Something I shouldn't be doing.
But what's hilarious is the person that you're pursuing is named Dwayne Reed.
Dwayne Reed, yeah. Well, you know, a lot of people have funny names. You know,
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who have very funny.
If people
Dwayne Reed.
don't live in New York, I mean that's our big chain pharmacy here,
Right.
here in New York
Right.
City. I mean, there's just millions of them. What was your reaction when you read that for the first time?
I thought this was something that Richard came across. I was like, this is pure Richard. That's what I thought. You know, that he knows some guy, Dwayne Reed. You know? I thought probably is very realistic.
Yeah.
You know, it's
Right.
probably really realistic, but the guy is like, come on, man, you're like making it up, you know? And I think that's a great thing in something that's so dark as this, is to have that. And I think that's what people do, because in the worst situations, people always opt to make a joke or something. You know, I used to ride when I did Clockers with Spike years ago, I rode with the homicide guys that Richard did all the research with. And I was like the lucky guy. Whenever I went with them, there was a killing. That was they would say, "Oh, Turturro's here, another death," you know. And those guys would make jokes all the time, because how are they supposed to survive and go home, you know? And so it is part of it, and I think it's important as long as it's coming out of, you know, from the right point of view.
Right. I think the balance in this series is just extraordinary. So, best of luck this coming weekend.
Okay, well, I'm happy to be there. So happy to be invited.
And thank you so much for talking, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Pleasure. Thank you.